Hello, in this video we're going to be discussing modifications that I have done to the Matrix or Golden Eagle box mag. I got two of them. One came with the MCR LMG here. The other I just bought straight from Evike when I bought the LMG because, well, you want more than one, especially if you're doing milsims. So one thing that is not on it right now is I did sew up these covers for them. Those just cover the outside, help keep the battery tray on. We'll get to that in a second. And just cover it, make it look a little nicer, make it look a little bit more LARPy. So the battery tray, I went ahead and added some Velcro. It just has a 1-inch strip of webbing on the top, and it's glued on. It is adhesive Velcro, but I also added some hot glue just for reassurance, and just glued it here. Okay, so that way you don't have to use a screwdriver to get into it. And if you do have one of these, you'll know that this door is a little loose, so as you're running around, can pop out, and that's enough room for one of the batteries to come dislodged. So instead of using a screwdriver to get into it, because I don't want to have to carry tools I don't need, okay, so instead of using a screwdriver to get into it, I can do that and then pop that open. There's my batteries. I can swap those. I will probably be swapping the batteries out eventually for a rechargeable option, but for right now that's what I'm rolling with. Next thing, and we'll get more into this once I show you the disassembled drum, but I opened up this slot on the side, which originally was where you draped the dummy rounds into. Opened up that slot, and I lost one of these, so I figured omit the ability to lose them in general. Instead of having the cover there, I put on some Velcro. You just took a big wide strip that I had laying around from a different project, cut it to shape. Make sure you cut right there along this seam here. Okay, this seam here. Cut along there so you can still open the drum without having to take off your Velcro. But I just cut it to shape and then hot glued it down for extra reassurance. This is just the hook side, or sorry, the loop side of the Velcro. Cut out a little notch for my wire here, and then added a little pull tab on it. Whatever works. If you're handy enough to do these kind of mods, then you're handy enough to figure that out. But that way I can just pull that open, nice and wide area to fill up instead of trying to get them in there. Downside is when you're filling this, then once you're done filling the main hopper, main reservoir, then you have to pop open the high cap port, and then you can fill them in up there. Okay. But that means that instead of doing now 3,000 rounds, okay, so Matrix advertises at 2,000. That's where I got these from Evike. Most of the Golden Eagle listings say 2,600 from what I've seen. So your mileage may vary. I will say after I was done modifying these, which was pretty easy. They hold about 3,000. So I'll specify what parts worked for that and what up to the capacity. So if you don't want to do some of the other mods, you don't have to. This wire hanging out the top, just punched a hole with my soldering iron. Barely see it in there. Punched a hole through with my soldering iron big enough to route the wire through, and then I hot glued it in place. So if your mag catch fails for whatever reason, it's not going to snap the wires or pull them out, or just while you're trying to attach it or just unattach it, then it's just easier that way. And it doesn't come undone. And what that is is so, of course it's empty, my airline isn't attached, so don't worry about it, but what that is it runs to this Dean's connector here on the side. I'm not going to attach it because it's a little finicky, but it's not too bad. You just need both hands, and getting it done on cameras, yeah, whatever. So what that is it opens up to here, okay? I have a secondary switch running into the gearbox. This is not on the actual engine's switch. This is an Inferno engine. Didn't feel like ruining a $300 and some odd engine or a $70 board. So it runs to a secondary switch in there that's on the opposite side of the gearbox as to what you attach the normal trigger board to. And so that runs to this JST. So if I want to run this with regular magazines at my local field, I definitely can. And I can just pop off that JST. It tucks into the gearbox because I cut out a bit of the gearbox. I can do a whole video on what I did to the gearbox and all that to set this up as well, but that's not the intent of this video. And so that runs across the top of this bridge here, okay, and to the Dean's connector. So that way, while I'm playing, and there's plenty of extra room in the top cover because it doesn't have the feeding arm that a real gun would have. Okay, so let me connect this so you can see what I'm talking about. So I still have the ability to go over to the auto setting. If you can hear that, it's probably really annoying. And it feeds auto like it would normally. But when I swap over to sound control, as you can see, it is off right now. You're gonna hear the engine firing because there's battery in there. But if I flip over to sound control, you can hear the drum winding as well. So while you're loading it, you're doing if you want to call it an administrative load. If you're in the military, you know what that means. Okay, if you want to do an admin load, then you can flip it to auto, do what you need to do. Or maybe when you first put it into the gun, you flip it to auto, and it'll wind it into the gun. And then for the rest of the time, you just flip it to trigger control or sound control, what's labeled as sound control. And you can hear the engine and the drum going at the same time. So that way it doesn't overfeed, and it keeps up with your gun. Hopefully, I run my LMGs on a comparatively low rate of fire compared to a lot of LMG gunners, something like 15 to 20 rounds per second. I found it works well enough for me in the past, so that's what I'm doing. So that's what this wire is. In case you're interested, there is the normal black and red wire in there. Don't need to color code it, but I did. Dean's connector, plenty of heat shrink on there to bridge the gap and to seal it to the Dean's connector. That way you have a nice little handle. And then there's just a bit of paracord on there that I did before all the heat shrinking, and that's just make it look a little bit nicer, less of a snag hazard, a little more reinforcement, and it's not exposed to UV rays, so it's less likely to fray in the sun. Okay, so then I'll talk about this first. I really hate the sound of the rattling from drums or high caps, so I went ahead and felt lined it. So if you see any of this gray material, that's what I did. Be very careful when you're doing it. It's really easy to overdo it so your drum doesn't fit back together very easily. What I would recommend is any of the parts where you have things that slot in. Okay, so this is a little feed door, slots in right there. Go ahead and pop that in place, mark it with silver Sharpie along the bottom there, and that gives you a glue line, if you will. I didn't do that on these. did it on the second drum. I learned my lesson, so hopefully you don't make that same mistake. If you do over glue it, go ahead and cut it with a razor blade, and then cut away from your fingers. Cut, the excess off, so it fits nicely. Don't try and force it. Now, out of the box, the one of the drums had a cut wire that went to the battery compartment. Easy enough to fix. If you're a tech or any way technologically inclined, then you should be able to do this just fine. But battery compartment here, I went ahead and labeled them just in case I wanted to disconnect all of the wires from it for whatever reason. I went ahead and labeled it on the battery pack so I can, get it back in place the right way. So again, felt lining. Do all your other modifications first, so that way you can just glue the felt in place. You don't have to go back and add more later. Okay, so I don't have a picture of what it looked like originally, but there was this metal plate. If I remember to, I might upload the original picture that I did take as the thumbnail, so you'll have to just look at that. There was a metal plate sat about here. This just slides out, so you pop that out, and then there's a box shape here. Just go ahead and I used snips. They're from Citadel, they're Warhammer snips, so they're good at cutting plastic. But you can also use a rotary tool if you're careful, or a soldering iron to hot cut it, or wood burner, something like that. But there's a little box shaped piece of plastic that comes down, and matching on the lid side. Okay, you can see some remnants of it there. Okay, here it looks like this little square here. Go ahead and remove as much of that as you can, and that's what becomes the little feeding area on the side. This is the hose that connects to, I'm letting things dangle like I shouldn't, but it connects to what is essentially a high cap magazine on its side that sits in there. Take some pictures as you're going. Once you open it up, once you take out the screws from the back, take pictures so you can see how all of it goes back in. Okay, that would be my recommendation. That's what I did. Take as many pictures as you need for reference. I have a soldering iron on standby. The wires this comes with is not very good, and like I said, one of mine was disconnected out of the box. A note about the motors is these are the motors I pulled out of a Nerf Strife. You can Google what that looks like. They're the same motors. The only difference is the shaft needs to be cut down to, I believe I measured these to 5 millimeters, but measure it on your own. You would of course need to replace the gear that attaches to the shaft, but if you need some extra motors, these are the exact same motors, minus they have a little board on them. These are the exact same motors as in this drum, so if you need extras, I would recommend those. You can also get them, not sponsored or anything, but outofdarts.com has, I believe they're the 130 motors. Those should fit and come as cheap as like $3 a motor, so, or as expensive as $10 or so a motor. So go ahead and I would email them just to see which ones fit in the Strife. These are the stock Strife motors, if I remember right. So yeah, if you want some extras, that's a good cheap place to get them instead of paying $15 for the Airsoft one. Okay, in case your motor goes out. Now, One thing of note is be very careful when you're pulling out, let's try and get this on camera. This part, okay, there's a gear that sits in the top. If you can see, there's this little silver bar going across that goes into the slots, which this is all mangled because I tried to fix it. I'm 3D printing some. Check with me in the comments if you're watching this later. I might have uploaded this to Colts or Thingiverse or something if it works. But the little silver bar in there is a spring. It has to slot into those. There you go. Maybe that side. Okay, if you can see the little slot right about there. Okay, just be careful with that. There's a little peg sticking out the bottom, which is what this is. It's actually the 3D printed one. But just be careful, because if that breaks, unless you can 3D print one, you're probably out a drum for a very stupid part. But so careful not to, make that wobble too much, or it might just break. And if you do take it out, there's a little silver clip on the bottom. You just pry that off nice and gently, and then this comes out the top. Wouldn't really recommend taking apart that or the motor housing unless you are replacing it. Just be careful. That slots in like an Allen key. Just be careful with that. Once both pieces are out of the drum, then you can just slide those two apart and you don't have to worry about it after that. Okay, and then you have this little door, which has a cutout for your feeding spring. Okay, so these two pieces sit like this inside the gearbox. Your spring goes through that hole. This one is probably the easiest piece to felt, and this is just a cheap craft felt from Walmart probably. So you can just lay down super glue. I don't recommend the hot glue. Super glue is better. Once it's dry, you can just put it upside down, let it dry. Then you just cut out your shape from the back. You just run your scissors along it. It's nice and easy. Again, I went too far with this. You want to leave a little gap along this side and this side, just where it slots into the drum. Don't be an idiot like me. Okay, so then when you get this drum initially, there are two little wires coming out of the back of the drum. For those of you who don't know, this is your microphone here for sound control. The wires run through and out the back. I just cut them at the back of the magazine in case for whatever reason I wanted them later. But that way there's nothing exposed. But if you do take the magazine part off, then you'd see wires. So I cut those, and then what I did is I went to, I had to grab something. So I went through my switch. That's just two little screws that pop off. You can see it down in there. I also labeled them. One says sound, one says auto. Just to make my life easier, I label things. Silver Sharpies are coming real handy when you're doing tech work of any kind. And so I labeled those. I also labeled which side's positive and which side's negative on the motor. You don't want it to spin backwards. Okay, so then I did this, and you can, okay, so yeah, then I did this, which it's probably backwards. I don't know, but you can pause the video, take a screenshot, whatever you need to do. But basically, battery, excuse my terrible handwriting, motor, switch, trigger. So the battery positive goes to the center pin on the switch. Now there are 6 pins. There's 2 sets of pins. Just go across one of them. Okay, so positive on the battery goes to the middle on the switch. The one side of the switch goes to the motor. The motor wire is also split to the trigger. The other side of the trigger goes to the other side of the switch. Negative on the motor goes to negative on the battery. Nice and easy. Okay, what this allows you to do is, if the switch is in the down position on this, or in the auto position, the way I wired it, okay, when it's in the auto position, it runs as normal because you have positive to positive, okay, and negative to negative. When it goes the other way, positive goes through the switch. You flip it to trigger sound control or trigger control. That goes to the trigger as a switch, and once the trigger is activated, it goes back to the motor. Splicing the wires was probably technically the most difficult part, but it's easy as long as you know what you're doing, and then just figuring out the diagram. It just helped me to put it on paper. Luckily I did, or else I wouldn't have that to show you guys. Okay, so once that's all wired in, and there is a little electronics board in there, you bypass that. I just took mine out. And honestly, I just unsoldered everything, resoldered it myself, with how bad the solder joints are in this. You know, it's just easier that way. I do have to resolder something on the motor, but that's easy enough to do. If you want to leave the sound control in, you can ignore the wiring part and just do the drum modifications. Okay, that little cutout there and on the main body of the drum. Then you would have sound control with about 3,000 rounds instead of the original 2,000 to 2,600, somewhere in there. Then you're golden, if that's what you want to do. Personally, I prefer trigger control. I think sound control is a little bit outdated, and also I run a Mincan and an HPA engine in this, so sound control isn't the best option. Sorry, I was trying to think if I did anything else. I think that's pretty much it. And then it's just felt lining it once you've done all your modifications. It's just felt lining it to make it quieter. It isn't that much quieter, but it's certainly a deeper sound, so it's less irritating, and the sound won't travel as far. Again, I'm planning on doing a battery swap on this once I get everything working the way I want it to. One of the nice parts about swapping the motor, if you do that, is that you can go to a 2S or a 3S. Right now there's 4 AA's, and for those of you who don't know, AA's, the websites say AA on some of them. They're AA's. For those of you who don't know, that's about a 1.5 volt-ish battery. Just the same as a 3.7 volt is labeled 3.7, but will go up to 4.2. There's some variation there, but it's a 1.5 volt battery, and with 4 of them, that gives you about 6 volts. Could you push this motor to a higher RPM by putting in a like a 7.4 or 7.2 or something like that? Yes, but you're also probably going to burn the motor at that point, because then your actual voltage is going from whatever the AAA's produce at maximum, depending on your brand, to 8.4, because 7.4 or 7.2s generally produce about 8.4 at the start. That gets into what batteries do and all that, and that's not the purview of this video. But if you did want to swap this to like a 3S or 2S motor, then you can probably get away with 3S or 2S. Although at that point, you're probably also looking at damaging your gears and stuff, which that's up to you. It's $35. If you kill the plastic bits in there, you can always swap that motor over to a new one, run it until it dies, swap it over to a new one, if that's how you want to go about it, and then that's you. For reference, the next step up would be like a Crytek or a G&G drum for a Shrike kind of build. You could get an Angel custom as well, but that just looks weird in my opinion. You could go up to, like, the Crytek one is, if it's in stock, it's well over $100. I think last one I saw was about 130 or so. So you could buy almost 4 of these drums for the price, or box mags or whatever, for the price of one Crytek. And Crytek has its own issues, and then you're probably going to want to do a bull gear swap into it or something of that nature. So this is a good budget drum, considering you should, if you're going to like Milsims or something, you really should have 2 drums to start anyway. And then 3, 4 drums if you're really hard on your drums. And that can really add up. So my thought is take this cheap drum. So far, other than the wire and the felt, I haven't invested any money into it. Dean's connectors and the trigger switch that goes into the box mag, but that's just a cheap little Chinese single pull double throw, I think. Cheap little switch. You can buy a pack of them on Amazon for like probably a dozen for like $10 or so, maybe less. And the price of felt, I mean, it's under $1, wire under $1. So you pretty much figure about $40 and maybe a couple days, depending on how good you are at wiring, but probably an afternoon. You get a 3,000 round drum that is now a lot easier to load through the side. You can also top it off if you're at a game that doesn't prohibit you from reloading in the field. You can, or if you go back to the fob and you're topping off, you can just peel that back or slide back a plate, and well, there you go. You can reload it in the field, or at least a lot easier. And holding 3,000 rounds, now I'll probably be downloading this to about 2,900. When I loaded it up to 3,000, it did jam the gears. I think there's just too much pressure inside the box. So I'll probably be downloading it to about 2,900, maybe 2,800. Not that I'm going to count, but that'd be my guess. And it will do the job. And if it does die, if it does break, then you're out $35 instead of 100 and some odd that you would be with Crytek or a G&G. So that was kind of the goal of this project, is because I knew I wanted more than one drum. These are a cheap price point. I know they work in the MCR because, well, that's what came in the MCR, so I would at least hope that works. And you still get that better, in my opinion, better looking profile versus like the Angel custom drum mags or something like that. They're also cheaper than the Angel customs. And you get a lot of capability out of a cheap drum, being that it is now trigger controlled, holding 3,000 rounds. You can upgrade the battery, you can upgrade the motor. Yeah, so I figured I'd do a video on what I did to modify mine, just because there weren't any other videos on what the inside looks like. So I figured I'd throw together a video, see if that helps anyone. If you did these mods, throw it down in the comments. Not that I care about growing the channel or anything, but just so I know that other people are doing these, and give me your feedback, what you did to it, how it's working for you. So maybe I can do that to mine as well. So yeah, have a good one.